and welcome to another recording of the Marketing Sessions. I'm Dan Taylor, and today I am honoured to be joined by Hannah Pearson, who is founder of Pear Anderson, a specialist tourism strategy and representation for the Southeast Asian and Muslim travel markets, who is actually joining me from a considerable time difference today. Good evening, Hannah.
Hello, good afternoon, Dan.
So thank you very much for taking time out to join us. So, do you want to just kind of give the viewers a little bit of a background as to what you specialise in and sort of people you work with?
Yeah, exactly. So I'm originally from the UK, but now based in Kuala Lumpur in Malaysia. So I've been in Malaysia about 8 years now. Been like 9 years in February, so it's whizzing by. I founded my current company a couple of years ago, Pear Anderson. And what we do is we specialise in two things. So one is sales representation for tourism companies within the Southeast Asian market. And by Southeast Asia, we mean countries like Cambodia, Indonesia, Laos, Malaysia, Myanmar, Philippines, Singapore, Thailand, Vietnam. So about 9 different countries. Brunei, if you want to be technical and include that, was so tiny. So on the one hand, we do the sales representation. On the other hand, we also work with tourism boards and tourism companies who need more insights into the Southeast Asian market. So previous clients that I've worked with include people like VisitBritain in the UK, the Barcelona Tourism Board. And all these guys want to kind of know what's going on in Southeast Asia and also the Muslim market as well, which is another specialization of ours.
Okay, great stuff. So, I mean, reason why I wanted to speak to you is because I think it'd be good to learn more about the Southeast Asian markets. I'm glad I'm in the right place. So with that, I mean, looking back to a time which now seems long, long ago, pre-2020, what trends and kind of changes in tact have you seen kind of develop over the Southeast Asian market with obviously a lot of emerging destinations and how they were starting to attract and gain themselves as being tourist destinations for wider audiences?
It's an interesting question. So I would say over the last 10 years or so, Southeast Asia has really exploded in terms of, not only in terms of tourists visiting Southeast Asia, but also in terms of Southeast Asian tourists visiting other parts of the world too. So you have countries like Malaysia this year, which was trying to aim for, I think it was 30 million visitors. They were going to have their Visit Malaysia 2020 year. Unfortunately, that didn't really come off, bad timing. You have other countries that were just really, they were powering ahead. I think Thailand had something like almost 40 million. They were planning to target about 40 million people originally this year. And a lot of this growth has started to come from China. So, there's that proximity between China and Southeast Asia. There's a lot of business links, trade links, everything else, politics-wise. And so you were starting to see more and more mainland Chinese tourists coming into Southeast Asia. I mean, and that's almost a little bit contentious for Southeast Asians because they're a little bit funny. A lot of them, and there are a lot of ethnically Chinese people within Southeast Asia, right? So Malaysia has a huge kind of Malaysian Chinese population. Indonesia's got Indonesian Chinese, Singaporean Chinese. But they are very, very careful to distinguish themselves from being mainland China Chinese. So there is this impression, a lot of them coming in big, or used to come in big tourist groups, being noisy, not really understanding the rules. There were always news articles about so-and-so went, this group of Chinese tourists came and visited this Thai temple and they used like this holy thing as a toilet. Always this kind of crazy news that was going on in the media in Southeast Asia. But ultimately, they were super reliant on them. Chinese tourists counted for a huge percentage of Southeast Asian tourism overall. And I think one of the other big differences that there's been in Southeast Asia is just the growth of low-cost airlines. So of course in Europe, we've got Ryanair, we've got EasyJet. In Southeast Asia, it's AirAsia that is the equivalent, that is really driving it. And you can see that what they've been doing is opening up smaller destinations as well. So they're starting to fly to those kind of secondary, tertiary destinations, which then start to be put on the map. So then tourists start to go visit those kind of undiscovered places too. They become more exciting, right? Everybody always wants to go to like a new destination. And so, the beginning of 2020, I think hopes were super high for all Southeast Asian countries. They all had really high targets. They were all developing lots of destination plans to spread tourism throughout the country. And of course, by end of January, which was Chinese New Year, already it was starting to come to like a hideous crash.
Even though you say, I mean, before we do touch on to what happened and caused the crash, which is the proverbial elephant in the room with regards to travel, even though those targets were quite high, and I know you said 40 million for Thailand, 13 million for Malaysia. I know in the UK there's been a lot of influence over there, so like Malaysian Airlines sponsoring reasonably sized football teams in the UK. For anyone who's not aware, that's Cardiff, who I've just called reasonably sized, so don't be offended. And then also people like Thailand investing
Leicester,
in Leicester, which is part of the King Power Group from that side. So even those targets were quite high. In your opinion, do you feel they all going to plan? Do you think they were reasonably realistic, or were they very objective and pie in the sky almost?
Definitely Malaysia's was a kind of pie in the sky. Their arrivals were, I can't remember the exact numbers last year, but it was maybe something about 26 million. So for them to have really got up to 30 million would have been a real push. They would have had to have been really lucky. But countries like Thailand, they probably would have achieved it. The numbers are going up and up and up. So they had every reason to be confident that that would happen.
No, that's just good. I mean, because obviously when we're talking about numbers, it's always just good to have that context, because being able to go to say 30 million, if you're at 29.9 million, it's not really ooh. So on that note, and obviously we touched upon at the end of January, the party started to end a little bit with Chinese New Year. Probably an understatement of the actual year. I'm pretty much sure I know what the answer to this is going to be. How devastating has it been on the Southeast Asian travel market? Not just probably in terms of, I mean, obviously it's going to be down, borders are going to be shut, the tourist numbers aren't going to be there, but I know in that area tourism plays a very large part in regional economies. So to the best you can speak to, what has been the main impact? Because obviously in the US, in the UK, most of Europe, we do have other industries where tourism isn't dominated, so it'd be good if you could speak and give some context around that impact.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, so you're right, countries like Thailand, they are, I think, one of the economies most reliant on tourism in the world. Of course, like you've got island nations like Jamaica and all of these other ones that, yes, like their only livelihood is tourism. But for Thailand, it's a really major economy here in Southeast Asia, and it's still really, really reliant for GDP on tourism. So something like this has completely hit it. Headlines came out last week that there are 1 million unemployed hotel workers, and that's just hotel workers. In Indonesia, and Indonesia, of course, has many other industries, quite heavy manufacturing and everything else. There are, I think it's 13 million tourism workers who are now unemployed in the company. Like 13 million. It's just an insane number. And the thing is, it's when you start to track not only those people who are in direct employment, so yes, those who work in hotels, who work in travel agents and so on, but it's those indirect workers. It's the rickshaw drivers, it's the people who run the stalls outside Angkor Wat, who are no longer getting tourists coming in and buying drinks. That's the people who it's really devastating for, because they don't have that fixed income before. So a lot of these guys are like slipping through social security nets. And of course, Southeast Asia doesn't have as good a social security network as, say, the UK. So there have been some kind of wage subsidies for tourism workers. There was informal work, of course, and informal ones are having to rely on handouts. So I was reading, again, another article about Phuket last weekend, and Phuket, really famous party island in Thailand, really reliant on international tourism coming in. And even though domestic tourism is open there, there's very little business, and workers there are queuing up for food handouts by charity, and the government has actually, or the local governor has actually run out of money pretty much to do state funded kind of food handouts. So this is just private charities that are taking it upon themselves to do this. So it is really quite dire.
And I think that kind of puts into context how, I know in the Western world we're seeing hotel workers affected, etc. But as you said, we've got a more robust trampoline system, I think, able to help people bounce back a little bit with regards to that. So kind of wanting to shine more towards the light at the end of the tunnel, which is going further. I know it's obviously Phuket's obviously in quite dire straits with the government money. Which destinations at the moment are you seeing? I not want to say bounce back, but almost resiliently show like they're climbing back up that ladder.
I mean, you've definitely got company. I mean, even Thailand is to a certain extent. The government there have put like this quite aggressive domestic stimulus package that's funding part of people's holidays. So we are starting to see those numbers climb. Cambodia is also increasing just a little bit. They had like a long weekend last weekend, and I think they said 110,000 people went on holiday, which is good. So it's like no, it's not 110,000. I think it's 1.1 million. Small difference. Starting to travel. I mean, and you have countries like Malaysia, where again domestic travel is climbing. The only thing is that it's in specific destinations, and as you would expect, it's normally only on weekends. So you've got that kind of staycations. But the thing is, how long or how many times can you go on a staycation? Particularly, you're seeing that kind of the swing towards hotels doing really well if they're on the beach or they're on an island. Hotels in cities like Kuala Lumpur not doing so well and kind of struggling because it's harder to convince. I'm in KL already. How many staycations can I take in a hotel? Maybe I'll do one, for a change of scenery, but after that, it's not really sustainable, right? You can't go stay in a hotel every weekend.
I was going to ask, in regards to staycations, how important do you think the internal tourism and that staycation market will be in not so much as kind of basically redistributing wealth from those sectors which haven't been as adversely affected to the tourism sector and maintaining employment? I'm just guessing that's just going to be critical to the recovery of these nations.
It is, yeah, definitely. And I think the kind of, I guess, one drawback about domestic tourism is that it isn't necessarily all sectors that it touches on. If you think a lot of people might drive somewhere, especially now, people don't really want to fly. So that might not necessarily be supporting the airlines. They're perhaps less likely to book via a travel agent because they feel quite comfortable and they think, well, I can book it all myself. So then you haven't got the money going to the travel agent. They might even be booking via an OTA. So, someone like Expedia or Agoda or Booking.com, something like that. So then the hotel isn't getting the direct money. The OTA is kind of getting that indirect cut of that too. So it does go some way, but it's hard for it to benefit everybody, I'd say.
Yeah, it's just more attempting to get a piecemeal almost as opposed to a solution.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in terms of what you're seeing tourist boards now, I remember I went through your coronavirus dashboard and I can see that most places have partial border openings, some of them with special visas in place. Are you seeing any tourist boards, any bodies changing their tactic? They're probably not doing anything at the moment. Are you seeing any initial pushes towards 2021? Or is it still kind of just trying to get through now?
Yeah, I think a lot of them are still just trying to get through now, like you say, and I think that they are all kind of re-gearing towards domestic tourism. So, that in itself is a huge shift because a lot of tourism boards have not really focused on domestic tourism up till now. They've always focused on international tourists coming in. So even, the kind of products that they might advertise, if you're looking at a country like Vietnam or Thailand, maybe they're actually more geared towards Western tourists coming in than they are geared towards local Thai people. What do local Thai people like to do when they're on holiday? What do local Vietnamese people like to do when they're on holiday? So tourism boards actually need like some kind of whole 180 rethink about what do local travelers actually want and what kind of products can we highlight. So I think they're going through kind of a major identity crisis at the minute and trying to figure that out.
No, that makes sense because, as you say, a lot of the advertising we get in the UK, for example, with Thailand and it's like discover the real Thailand, discover Phuket. But if you're already from Thailand, you don't need to discover the real Thailand. You just need to have a different bedroom, a different change of scenery. And,
right,
no,
exactly, different food or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, not instead of looking at a lake, you're looking at a beach or a mountain or like displacement. So in regards to that, when the identity crisis kind of happening, so a lot of the drawers bringing Western travellers in. What advice would you give to more of the smaller businesses, the SMEs, the small travel operators operating in Asia whose primary focus is taking Westerners to that marketplace for travel? What advice would you give them at the moment in terms of probably both perseverance as well as what they could probably look to for the future?
I think they have to be super realistic because right now a lot of tourism boards or tourism companies, sorry, have got such limited budget because they have literally zero income coming in. So for them, it is really weighing up, should we just kind of hibernate? So essentially, we're kind of closed for now. When we see borders starting to reopen, then we reopen to save costs? Or do we start investing some more because we think that domestic tourism is still going to continue? And, you know, if you'd asked me maybe a couple of months ago, I would have probably said, maybe you guys should maybe hibernate. But it looks like domestic tourism, you know, borders are not going to open up anytime soon. I don't think so. So I think if they really want to survive, it's not a matter of, oh, let's just hunker down till Christmas and we'll get, you know, January 2021, it's going to be a new world. It's not going to be, right? It's going to be the same. They've just got to start. It's almost the same as tourism boards. They've got to start asking around. They've got to start developing new products, being a bit innovative, being a bit creative. So there's this really cool, I keep talking about this because I think it's really great. Obviously in Singapore, they're really limited. What can you do for a staycation? Singapore is just a city-state, right? It's like a tiny island. You can't go anywhere. But they're trying to encourage this domestic tourism. And so you've got a hotel group that have actually partnered with Wildlife Reserve Singapore. So these are the guys who kind of run like the safari park and the zoos and things. And they've come out with this special package where you can stay in the hotel. And because you stay in the hotel, you get like that insider access to behind the scenes at the zoo, and you get to, you know, meet the wildlife rangers and that kind of thing. I think you've got to be really creative now, and you've got to figure out what kind of insider experiences people might be looking for that they wouldn't have ever been able to access before. And that kind of creativity, I think it should pay off.
Yeah, as you just say, it's about taking a product which necessarily might not have demand and increasing the value. It's almost going back to the old what I used to do in GCSE business before, P element of your price can't really change, the place can't change, but what can you do? You can amend the product to justify the other three. So it's almost, taking it back to basics and creating added value. One final question before we tie things off, and this is kind of leaving the South Asian travel market, but one which I'm kind of curious about is another area that you focus on, the Muslim market.
Yeah.
And how have you seen the virus and travel restrictions, etc., affect a lot of the more traditional Muslim travel elements, especially for pilgrimages in Iraq, etc.? How have you seen that be impacted?
Yeah, I mean, that is, you know, in Southeast Asia again, and I'll take Southeast Asian angle, sorry, but it could be global too. It's big, you know, so Saudi Arabia, very early on, they stopped Umrah, which is the kind of the pilgrimage. They stopped Hajj, which is the big pilgrimage that you've got to do to Saudi Arabia once in your lifetime. And by essentially stopping those, it's it's been really quite devastating for a lot of the smaller travel agencies. You know, in Malaysia and Indonesia, there's a lot of really tiny travel agencies. Maybe they've just got 5 or 6 people, and all they do, the only business they do, is they sell Umrah and they sell Hajj. And when Saudi Arabia cancelled that, that's their income gone. I mean, the only kind of silver lining that is coming is, you know, Saudi Arabia has opened up again now for international flights. And I've got a feeling, I think Umrah will be reopened before the end of the year. I reckon that will happen. And I think that might be quite a fundamental change actually for travel agents here in this region, because it might actually give them some kind of revenue, because I can imagine that the governments here would be more open to allowing this kind of pilgrims to travel Saudi Arabia, just because it's like a very controlled itinerary. You're on a very controlled group. There's not that so much of an element of you going off by yourself and exploring and, you know, having loads and loads of contact with the locals. So I think that actually could be a potential revenue stream that might come on before the end of the year again.
Well, that's kind of a positive note on
Yeah.
to end on, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel there. And as you said correctly, on the excursions, it's quite, as you said, a limited itinerary. There's not just people who randomly going off to on the typical glass bottom boats and looking at the underwater fish and all the rest of it, and
Yeah.
the typical excursions you get stung for in hotels and things like that. So but now I'd like to say thank you very much for your time, Hannah, and for sharing your insights. And it's been a pleasure speaking with you. Just so that anyone out there who wants to get in touch with you, how can people get a hold of you?
Yeah, so you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Just find me at hannah.f.pearson. You could also find me on my website, pearanderson.com. And if you're super interested in Southeast Asia, like Dan says, I run like a weekly report on the impact of Southeast Asia, on the impact of COVID-19 on Southeast Asian tourism. Or if you're into podcasts, I also host my own podcast with my co-host Gary at the Southeast Asia Travel Show, where we discuss all things Southeast Asian tourism industry related. So a few places for you to find me there.
And links to all of those will be in the description below. This is me just reminding future Dan to actually do that, so I usually miss it off. Well, thank you very much for your time, Hannah. It's been a pleasure. And yeah, so the last thing to say is I've been Dan Taylor, and this has been Hannah Pearson, so goodbye.